The hall was filled with lights, balloons, and the joyful sounds of voices mingling with laughter and music. It was the day he had waited for years, graduation day, the culmination of sleepless nights, assignments delivered on impossible deadlines, and the silent struggle to get there. The whole family gathered, friends came from far away, and even the neighbors seemed to share in his parents' pride. Cameras flashed every second, the hugs were sincere, and his heart pounded with a sense of accomplishment. For the first time he felt he would finally be seen, recognized, perhaps even admired. He believed that this would be the moment when his parents would look at him and say, "We are proud of you." As the master of ceremonies announced the graduates' names, he watched his parents in the audience smiling. Each exchanged glance seemed a silent promise of affection and reward. The world seemed perfect, as if nothing could break that harmony. When it was his turn to go up on stage, the applause rang out loud and warm, but what moved him most was his father's emotional gaze, that restrained gleam that said everything words couldn't. After the ceremony, the family went to the party. The tables were decorated, the dishes served, and the atmosphere overflowed with happiness. He breathed a sigh of relief, believing that this day would be forever remembered as a symbol of victory and family unity. But fate sometimes has a peculiar way of transforming perfect moments into unexpected revelations. When his parents announced they had a special surprise to share, his heart raced, without imagining that in a few seconds that day would completely change its meaning. When the father took the microphone and asked for silence, all eyes turned to him. The mother beside him smiled with a gleam of satisfaction in her eyes, holding a small golden envelope in her hands. The protagonist, still euphoric from the graduation, believed the moment was a tribute to him. After all, it was his day. The entire room was filled with anticipation. The father began to speak about the value of dedication, perseverance, and the pride he felt for his children. Each word seemed to foreshadow something grand. He adjusted himself in his chair, his heart racing, imagining he would receive a symbolic gift for years of effort. But suddenly, her father called her sister. "Daughter, come here," he said, his voice filled with emotion. The guests applauded as she walked to the center of the hall with that smile that always drew everyone's attention. Her mother handed her the golden envelope and announced, "We are so happy to tell you that you have won an international scholarship. Your future begins now." The reaction was immediate. Applause, shouts of joy, camera flashes. Her sister wept with emotion, hugging her parents, while the guests rose to congratulate her. The protagonist remained seated, a tense smile attempting to conceal his discomfort. He was proud of his sister, of course, but he couldn't shake the bitter feeling of invisibility. It was his day, his achievement, but the center of attention had shifted. With each hug he gave his sister, he felt himself diminishing, as if his own effort had been forgotten. The voices around him seemed distant, muffled. He looked at the stage, trying to understand what had happened. Inside him, something fell silent, not anger, but sadness. The same silence that had once been one of expectation was now the weight of not being remembered. And unknowingly, that moment would be the beginning of a turning point that would change the course of the family's life. The hall was still echoing with applause, laughter, and toasts when he noticed something that cut through the air around him. Among so many voices celebrating his sister, no one else spoke about the graduation. No one asked about his plans, his efforts, his sleepless nights. It was as if, suddenly, he had become a shadow in that place, present, but invisible. He held a glass of juice in his hands, observing the scene from afar, the father hugging his daughter, the mother taking photos, the guests asking questions about the exchange program. Everything revolved around her, and he, standing there, realized that his own moment of victory had been swallowed up by the excitement of others. He forced a smile when someone asked if he was happy for his sister. "Of course I am," he replied, his voice calm and his gaze concealing what his heart screamed. The pain wasn't envy, but the pain of being forgotten. He didn't want the spotlight, just to be remembered. As soft music played in the background, he discreetly moved away, seeking a quieter corner. He leaned against a wall, watching the reflection of the colored lights dancing on the floor, and felt the weight of years trying to please, trying to be enough. His mother walked past him, distracted, oblivious to the shadow of sadness in his eyes. His sister, surrounded by friends, laughed loudly, and he, for the first time, realized how distant that laughter sounded. All she had ever wanted was to feel like she belonged there, to that family, at that table. But at that moment, The joy that filled the room seemed to have no space for him. He took a deep breath, adjusted his tie, and tried to convince himself it was just a misunderstanding, that later, perhaps, someone would remember to thank him. But as the hours passed and the toasts were repeated, he understood. That day, which should have been the culmination of his journey, had become the silent symbol of his invisibility. And the smile he maintained was just a mask, a barrier between the pride he pretended to feel and the loneliness that consumed him from within. As the party began to disperse and the lights were no longer so intense, the protagonist walked towards the exit, his steps slow and silent. The background laughter seemed distant, as if it belonged to another world. It was then that he felt a hand land on his shoulder. It was his father. The man, always reserved in his words and emotions, had a different look, deeper, more serious. Without saying much, he extended a small beige envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed with wax. "Keep this safe," he said in a calm, almost solemn tone. "It's something that will make sense at the right time." Surprised, the son held the envelope between his fingers, not understanding the reason for it. "What is this?" he asked, trying to hide his curiosity. The father simply replied with a slight smile, "A gift that doesn't need an audience." And then he walked away, leaving him with more questions than answers. His sister, a few meters away, was still chatting with the guests, laughing, displaying the golden envelope from her purse like a trophy. Nobody noticed the discreet gesture between father and son. Later, alone in his room, he carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small, aged metal key. His father's words were simple yet laden with meaning. "Not every gift needs to be announced. This key opens something that has always been yours, even when you didn't know it. It's my way of saying, I trust you." The son ran his fingers over the key, observing its faded shine. He didn't know if it was a metaphor, a riddle, or just a symbol, but he felt a lump in his throat. For the first time that day, he didn't feel invisible. He tucked the letter into his jacket pocket, close to his heart, and remained silent for long minutes. Outside, the sounds of the party continued, but something inside him began to change. That small gesture, made away from the applause, carried more weight than all the speeches of the night. It was the forgotten gift, the one not given in front of the cameras, but which transforms the destiny of the one who receives it. The following morning, the sun timidly streamed through the window as he picked up the envelope again. The previous night seemed like a hazy dream. The party, the euphoria, the feeling of being forgotten, and that mysterious gift delivered in silence. He sat at the table, took a deep breath, and opened the letter again. The paper had the faint scent of old wood, and his father's firm, careful handwriting seemed to carry decades of meaning. "My son," the text began, "there are things that don't need to be said in front of everyone. Love isn't always shown in applause." He continued reading, his heart racing. His father spoke of the old family home, a property that had belonged to his grandfather and was located away from the city, surrounded by trees and memories. It was the place where he had learned to ride a bicycle, where he helped his father fix things in the yard, and where the family spent summers before moving to the big city. In the letter, his father revealed that the house was now his. "This key opens not just a door, but a legacy. This house is yours, and with it comes the responsibility of caring for what has always upheld our family name, work, silence, and truth." As he read those words, the memories returned like a film. The afternoons in the orchard, the smell of bread coming from his mother's oven, the sound of rain on the roof. Every detail seemed to pulse within him again, as if the house were alive, calling him back. Discreet tears streamed down his face as he realized that, even without saying anything publicly, his father had recognized everything he was, his loyalty, his constancy, his uncelebrated effort. The key in his hands seemed to gain weight, as if it carried stories, promises, and forgiveness. It was a gift that couldn't be contained in boxes, nor did it need applause. His father had entrusted him with what was most precious, the family's roots. And in that instant, the protagonist understood that some rewards don't come with celebration. They come in silence, in the subtext of a letter written with love and wisdom. He read the letter more than once, trying to absorb each word as if deciphering an ancient secret. It wasn't just a gift, and he knew it. That key, aged and heavy, represented something that transcended the material value of a house. It was the silent language of his father, a man who was never one for grand gestures or declarations, but who knew how to communicate love and appreciation through discreet actions. The house wasn't just an inherited possession, it was a symbol, a testament to the trust, continuity, and emotional legacy passed down from generation to generation without needing words. He remembered all the times his father had called him to help with something simple, fixing the gate, painting the wall, tending the garden. At the time, I thought they were common tasks, but now I realized that each one was a lesson in disguise: responsibility, patience, and commitment. That testament wasn't written on official papers, but in shared memories, in understood silences, in glances that said more than speeches. His father, with his quiet wisdom, was giving his son not just a roof over his head, but the continuation of a story. He understood that his sister's bag represented the future, flight, learning beyond borders, but his present represented roots, the foundation. And while thinking about this, he realized that life is made precisely of this balance, between those who leave and those who stay, between those who dream and those who sustain. For the first time, he felt neither envy nor sadness. He felt peace. That morning, the weight of the key in his pocket felt different, lighter but also more meaningful. It was as if his father had left an invisible message there. I always saw you even when the world didn't. And that silent, profound recognition was the true testament. Not an inheritance document, but a declaration of love and trust engraved in simple gestures, invisible to the eyes of those who seek glamour, but eternal for those who understand the value of essence. The news spread quickly. Her sister, still basking in the excitement of her scholarship, discovered the house by chance, a casual comment from a relative during Sunday lunch. At first, she thought it was a joke, one of those family stories that take shape over time. But when her brother confirmed it, with the serenity of someone who neither wanted to hide nor boast, the atmosphere changed completely. Her smile faded. The old house? Grandpa's? Dad gave it to you? Her voice came out broken, more surprised than annoyed, but soon a tone of discomfort filled the air. The parents, seated at the table, exchanged tense glances. The mother tried to soften the blow. "Daughter, each of you received something special." But the words sounded empty. The sister, her pride wounded, quickly replied, "Special? He gets a house and I get a scholarship? Does that seem fair to you?" The atmosphere, previously calm, became heavy. The protagonist remained silent, not out of fear, but out of respect. He knew that any word at that moment would be interpreted as provocation. His sister had always been the center of attention, the bright girl, full of ambition and grand plans. She grew up accustomed to hearing praise, while he, the quieter one, stood out only for his effort and consistency. The difference between them had never been a source of conflict, until that day. The resentment that arose now was not just about the gift itself, but about what it represented, their father's recognition. She stood up from the table, visibly hurt. "I always thought I was his favorite, but it seems I was wrong." He left without looking back, leaving an uncomfortable silence in the air. The father sighed deeply, and the brother, with the key still in his pocket, felt the symbolic weight of that inheritance increase. He didn't want to divide the family nor compete, but sometimes the truth about paternal love awakens wounds that time tried to hide. And at that moment, the house, once a symbol of trust, also became a mirror of the emotions the family avoided, facing jealousy, comparison, and the difficult art of accepting the value of others. Tension hung over the house like a thick fog. Since the lunch where her sister had discovered the truth, the family atmosphere had changed. Conversations that once flowed lightly were now measured, and the glances exchanged at the table carried the weight of what was left unsaid. The father, noticing his daughter's distance, decided to call her to talk. He closed the office door and asked her to sit down. The initial silence was more eloquent than any words. He took a deep breath and began, his voice calm but firm. "Daughter, we need to talk about what happened." She crossed her arms, avoiding her father's gaze. "I don't understand, Dad. Why did he get the house? I always thought you were fair to both of us." The father waited a moment before answering. "And I was. But fairness doesn't always mean equality." The daughter frowned, confused. Then he continued, "The scholarship we gave you is an opportunity. It will allow you to grow, see the world, follow your dreams. The house I left with your brother is a responsibility. It's where your roots are, where our story began. Each gift carries a different destiny." The words fell like silent stones. The sister tried to argue, but the father continued calmly, You have always been light, movement, the future. He, on the other hand, is what keeps the ground firm. I entrusted him with what sustains our memory. This is not more or less. It is simply different." The daughter, still holding back tears, finally looked up. "So you think I wouldn't be able to take care of the house?" The father approached and placed his hand on her shoulder. "It's not about ability, daughter. It's about purpose. Each of you received what best suits who you are." Silence filled the space again, but this time it was a silence of understanding. She didn't answer, only nodded slightly. As she left the office, the father was alone, looking at an old family photo on the table. He knew that conversation hadn't erased the hurt, but it had planted the seed of understanding, because sometimes a father's love manifests itself not in the equality of gifts, but in the wisdom of entrusting each child with what his heart knows they can bear. The party continued in high spirits, although the atmosphere among the family members still held remnants of tension. The loud music and laughter seemed to come from somewhere else, far away, as if they were no longer part of the protagonist's reality. He observed everything with a serene gaze, like someone who finally understands that certain battles don't need to be won, only understood. While his sister smiled again, trying to disguise the discomfort of the last few days, and his parents chatted with the guests, he discreetly got up. No one noticed his immediate departure, and he preferred it that way. He walked to the door with calm steps, feeling the symbolic weight of the keys in his hand. The metallic sound of them gently clinking against each other seemed to echo louder than all the music in the hall. It was a sound of belonging. Outside, the night air was cool, and the light breeze brought with it a feeling of freedom he hadn't felt in a long time. He paused for a moment, looked at the sky and smiled. Not the forced smile of someone trying to appear happy, but the smile of someone finding peace after years of silence. The sound of laughter, now distant, mingled with the rustling of the wind. It was as if the world inside represented everything he had left behind: the search for approval, the need to be noticed, the desire to be applauded. And there, outside that environment of appearances, he realized something simple and profound. The true value of things lies not in the brightness of the lights, but in the meaning they carry. The keys, cold against his skin, were not just for a house. They were proof that he had been seen, recognized, and loved, even without speeches or an audience. They were the symbol of an emotional legacy that transcends the material. He took a few steps toward the car, but before getting in, he looked once more at the illuminated room. Some gifts, he thought, only make sense when we are ready to understand them. And with that certainty he left in silence, not running away but moving forward, aware that the true triumph lay precisely there, in the quietude of someone who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. The following days were filled with silence and reflection. He visited the old house for the first time since discovering the letter. The road there seemed shorter than he remembered, perhaps because time, with its twists and turns, was leading him back to his starting point. When he opened the door with the key his father had given him, the sound of the latch echoed like a whisper of welcome. The smell of aged wood, the creaking of the floorboards, and the accumulated dust brought back memories that time had not erased. That place, simple and silent, carried stories that no diploma or applause could replace. He walked through the rooms and in every corner saw fragments of his childhood: the bench where his father sat to sandwood, the worn rug where he and his sister played, the height markings still etched on the kitchen wall. Each detail seemed to tell a story of silent love, of work, of faith and perseverance. He sat in the old chair on the porch, and the sound of the wind through the trees seemed to answer the questions his heart had kept for so long. He understood then that that house was not just a property. It was the symbol of everything built with patience and truth. It represented the roots of a family, the foundation upon which any future is built. His sister had received the gift of flight, the chance to explore the world. He had received the gift of permanence, the mission of guarding what truly matters, and both, on their distinct paths, carried their father's love, expressed in different but equally profound ways. The protagonist gazed at the horizon and smiled. The true inheritance wasn't the brick structure, but the invisible legacy left in choices and gestures. He understood that life's greatest gifts rarely come with applause. They are silent, yet eternal. They are what shape character, strengthen the spirit, and keep alive the essence of who we are. And there, sitting on the porch of the house that was now his, he felt the weight of gratitude for having learned that a man's worth is not measured by what he receives, but by what he is able to understand and preserve.